Lokati here. Today we're going to be talking about our explosive trap acid flask Falconer. This is a fairly straightforward build that is going to be using explosive trap to trigger acid flasks to do the majority of our damage. We're also utilizing Falcon Strikes and Dive Bomb and Smoke Bomb for movement, buffs, and debuffs as well. Now we're going to go ahead and look at one of our 100 corruption monoliths here just to get an idea of a baseline on this guy to see how he does. As we're playing, most of the time we're going to be moving, using smoke bomb to move, and tossing out explosive traps. On single target right here, we just dump out a bunch of explosive traps, let the acid flask bounce over and do damage, and then continue to move on as we're doing the same thing. Just tossing out explosive traps, using dive bomb to activate them to get our buffs, and then moving and sticking, and then moving and sticking. Gameplay is nice and smooth. We have a ton of move speed. We get a ton of dodge from explosive trap, as well as a ton of glancing blow from explosive trap. We are running about 50 to 80% dodge, depending on how many times we can hit a target, and well over 100% glancing blow as long as the target can live for more than one hit. Now, our primary defenses come from dodge, glancing blow, armor, and ward. We are using 2 third eye rings in order to generate ward on crit. We are running approximately 100% crit with crit vulnerability up, and so we are getting a ton of ward generation from that. We are also using Silver Shroud to get a guaranteed dodge once we leap into something, and then that guaranteed dodge is also going to give us a burst of ward, and then again, targets that live for a long time will generate ward consistently on. Now, ward right now is going to be between 1,000 and 1,500 for us against targets that live. As you get your gear better and you get more ward retention through Frostbite Shackles, then you will increase that ward as you go on. In game, you're probably going to be looking at running around 2k life, around 3 to 4k ward versus targets that are going to live for any period of time that matters. Now, we're going to go ahead and do a monolith boss real quick. This is Raye. We have no void resistance, so we're going to go ahead and dodge the attacks that he does toss out, but it doesn't matter. He dies very, very quickly. Leap in, stand in our smoke bombs, spam out explosive traps, get those dive bombs and those falcon strikes going, and just melt the boss. There's nothing complicated here. Again, we do want to dodge out of those voids because we personally don't have the void resistance to take a hit, but normally we would. And at the end of this, we're going to go ahead and take that void resistance right there. Now, like I said, playstyle on the build is nothing complicated here. You do want to make sure that you are using dive bomb consistently for the buffs that it provides, as well as the damage that it provides. And you want to be using Falcon Strikes for larger targets that take a little bit of time to kill. Now, Falcon Strikes does maintain an execute, so you want to use that during the execute phase on the boss if possible. But at the beginning of the fight, you just want to use it on cooldown because it does do a tremendous amount of damage. Now let's go and take a look at our skill tree here and our builder. We're going to do things a little bit differently in this video. Usually I have a full out build set up for you to look at with all the best in-game gear, and players are probably not consistently getting to that, especially on this build, because the in-game gear on this is very difficult to get to. So we'll talk about progression of gear. Our guy has kind of a mid to low level tier of gear right now. We'll look at what we have and we'll talk about what you can improve on and where you can do to make changes to this build. So starting off at our helmet, Peak of the Mountain is an absolute requirement for this build. We are a crit-based build with very little access to flat crit, and so high increased critical strike chances off of our helm is an absolute requirement here. Now you can see on my helm, I actually only have 257. You would probably want a better roll on that, but this is just what dropped when we were playing the character, and so it's what we're going to go ahead and run with for right now. For our amulet slot, you will not want a sapphire amulet here. You'll want a bone amulet. That'll help round off your resistances. But that's what we have right now is a sapphire amulet. This is a good temporary one. For our modifiers on the amulet, we do want critical strike multiplier and throwing damage in our prefixes. We do want cold resist and a much better roll on the elemental resistances. on our suffix, but this just ran out of forging potential before we got there. But again, the only change you're going to make here is you're going to want a bone amulet on your in-game gear to round off your physical and your necrotic resistance right here. Now for a body armor, we're using Eliko's Abandon right now. Ideally, you would want to slam Ward on Shadow Creation here and respec your smoke bomb into generating shadows. That is going to receive some nerfs here shortly, however, so I didn't really push too hard for adding them to the build, but it will be good even after the nerfs to have that. Cold resistance is the next best stat. We are scaling cold resistance for two things. One, it's giving us cold penetration on all of our acid flasks, and two, it's giving us ward retention from our frostbite shackles. So cold resist is very good here, but that prefix that slammed on here, it's bad. We'd much rather have the ward. And again, up on our helmet, we want the same thing. Cold resist and ward per shadow generated. We just don't have a 2 LP peak of the mountain yet. For our weapon here, you want any dagger that gives you 4% flat critical strike. It's an absolute must. Before you have access to that, use one that gives you 3%. Before you have access to that, use one that gives you 2%. This flat crit is absolutely crucial on here, but you do have a lot of options on daggers, so that is very nice to have. Now, ideally, we would have a T6 or a T7 crit strike multi, not increased critical strike chance, but that's what we have on this one. And then shred armor is phenomenal. And then something else, frailty on the back end of it, or chance to chill on hit would be nice. Something besides shred or increased stun chance on here would be good. And you have a lot of options. You can go with there's a cold penetration would be good. Chance to slow on hit is okay. Chance to chill on hit is good. You have a lot of different options there. This is kind of just what we have. It's not a bad weapon though. Over here, Vial of Bottle Ice is a requirement for the build. It is a very, very powerful item that converts our acid flasks to cold flasks, converts our poison penetration on acid flask to cold penetration on acid flask, and increases all the damage from our cold as well as our area skills. And so this is a requirement for the build. Ideally, you would want to slam on a T6 crit strike multiplier and a T5, a T6 or T7, and a T5 cold resist. This is just kind of what we had and what we got whenever we made it. Now our rings, we do want 2 rings of the third eye here. We would much rather have T7 throwing mana cost on both of these because that would mitigate all of our mana cost from acid flask. But T7 throwing damage and throwing mana cost is very expensive on the Merchant's Guild right now. And so T4 will cut it, and you can play very well with this. Now you want either cold resistance or increased critical strike chance to be on there, and so both of these rings rolled really well. For our belt, we do want a Spider Silk Sash. We do want throwing damage. We do want mana regen. We do want cold resistance. And the fizz resistance on this is nice to have. It could be elemental resist if you want even more damage, but the fizz resistance on here with a bone amulet would cap our fizz resist, which would be very, very nice to do. Now for our boots, we want increased move speed and however much attunement it takes so that our intelligence is equal to our attunement. This is important. You can use a ring to do that, but it's really hard to slam attunement on here, especially since you might change your vial later, and then that will change the int that you have. And so we use our boots because it's a more versatile piece of gear. But if our intelligence equals our attunement, we can proc 3 water orbs with our Usinu's Sphere, which we'll go over in a minute. Outside of that, we also want to have some other suffixes that are beneficial to us. These boots are garbage. You would not want these boots long term. Now, Heoborian boots are good for the cold resist, but you can also use Citadel boots to get some reduced bonus taken from critical strikes and cap your critical strike avoidance in a different manner. And for this build, we're going to be using the boots and critical strike avoidance, and then crit avoidance on our blessings in order to cap our critical strike. Now for another suffix, obviously we would want cold resist here would be the ideal suffix that we carry on the boots. in addition to the critical strike avoidance here. Now these have 3 seconds of frenzy after you use a traversal skill. That's a nice one. You could also use a different experimental. And so you've got the experimental haste effect for additional movement speed. You've got the ward gained on traversal skill is nice. And then you've also got ward gained on, no, just the ward gain on traversal skill. So this is also a nice one to have. There's a lot of different things you can do with your boots here, and this is a very versatile piece. Now, for your gloves, you have to have frostbite shackles. Ideally, you want 2 LP. Ideally, you'll want to slam probably throwing damage and cold resist on these gloves. It is important that you get a high roll on the increased chance to apply frostbite for some additional damage and the ward gain on freeze. Really, it just matters that they have 2 LP, and then you slam the right stats into them. Until then, you can just wear regular roll and frostbite shackles. Again, this is scaling our ward retention at 1% ward retention per uncapped cold resist, and we're running a lot of cold resist in the end game. Now, our Ysinus Sphere is our other source of damage and resistances. And so this increases our cold damage, increases our cold resist. We also get some lightning resist out of it, which is nice to have. And as long as your attunement is equal to your intelligence, you have a 100% chance to cast Water Orb on your target when you hit a boss or a rare enemy. Water Orb gives us a buff that increases our damage by 30% for cold damage for each water orb you've been cast in the past 12 seconds, which means that you can get 4 instances of this, which is 120% increased cold and damage for each orb cast. And we're casting 3 orbs with attunement equal to intelligence, which is 360% increased cold damage. A huge boost to our cold damage. We don't actually have a lot of flat increased cold damage. So this is a very, very important piece of gear. Again, we want to get 2 LP on here. We want to slam crit multi on here. And we want to slam cold resistance on here. Now for our idols, we're just filling out stuff for our idols here. If you're missing resistances, you can use these for resistances. If you're missing crit strike chance, we can use these for crit strike chance. If you need a little bit of health to feel comfortable, you can add health in here. These are very versatile pieces for filling out your build. For an offensive critical strike chance, we want this critical strike chance to get up to about 80% while we're in combat. That way our crit strike vulnerability is covering the last 20%. In combat, with all of my buffs, I'm sitting at like 80, 81%. And so this is a good crit strike base chance before all of our actual in combat buffs are going off. Now, if you don't have the ability to get your crit strike chance to about 80%, you can use these idols to fill out any additional increased crit chance that you might need to get there. You can also use these for cold res if you have all of the crit strike you need and you have enough ward generation that you're comfortable, you can get rid of the health and start adding in cold res here. And then necrotic, physical, poison res as needed to fill out your defenses. Now for blessings, don't look at my blessings. I haven't finished them yet. We did choose void resistance to cap our void resist. Once we have our gear sorted out and we can get our void resistance handled without this blessing, we will switch over to a crit strike multiplier blessing on here instead. Over here, we have ward decay threshold because that's what we got. That's not what we want though. We would much rather have either increased cold damage or ward per second. No, I think just increased cold damage. I think this is what we would much rather have here. We would rather have a greater blessing of increased cold damage here in this node. Now, over here, I've got crit strike avoidance. I haven't done the greater blessing yet. We'll be doing the empowered blessing, and then we'll be getting the greater crit strike avoidance here. You can also go with the all resists here if you're solving your critical strike in a different manner. This is going to help you round out all of your resists and give you extra cold resist. That's also a solid option. Now over here, I have cold resistance in here. We don't need to shred cold resistance. We're doing that with explosives traps. You could, instead of going cold resistance, go armor here if you needed some additional armor. You could instead go chance to imply frostbite or increase cold resistance right here if you wanted larger cold resistance, or increase fizz resistance if you don't have your fizz resistance sorted out. So you have a little bit of flexibility on that blessing. And over here, I've got fire resistance because that was our only option as we were going. But again, you could use increased armor here. You could use frailty if you don't have a source of frailty on hit. You can use fire resist to increase your fire resistance. Since you got a little bit of flexibility here, you could even go down to increase dodge rating if you just want to polish up and get your dodge rating a little bit higher as well. Now, from a passive skill perspective, we're level 81, 82 right now, and 81, so we've got 19 unspent points. The rogue tree itself, 7 out of 8 for here for poison resist and dodge rating. Then we have damage taken while moving and increased dodge rating. And then haste on hit chance and increased damage per 1% move speed. We polish it off with 5 out of 8 on the Swift Assassin for attack speed and fizz damage. These points are flexible. Like if you need a little bit more poison rating, you can move some of this down to here. If you need a little bit more dodge or a little bit less damage while taken, you move points down from over here. If you don't really feel like you need the haste or the increased damage, you can move them over here for survivability, flexibility in these points. But these are going to be the stats that you want to choose from. On our marksman tree, we're taking 5 out of 5 here for the increased critical strike chance, which is global. We go 5 out of 8 here for the increased damage with concentration, so that we can get to 4 out of 10 on Wound Maker for critical vulnerability chance. Now, crit vuln increases your chance to critical strike by 2% per stack, and it stacks up to 10. Realistically, at the speed that we're hitting things, somewhere at a rate of 20 times per second, 4 out of 10 is more than enough. You could probably get away with 3 out of 10 here if you wanted to as well. You could even get away with 2 out of 10 on targets that are not moving like big bosses. We go 4 out of 10 just to make sure we have a high uptime on this on just about everything. Over on Falconer, we're going to get 5 out of 5 here because we really like more damage with haste and a chance to gain haste. More multiplicative damage is very important to scaling our build. We only go 1 out of 8 here so that we can get 5 out of 5 for Crimson Shroud chance. We come over here and get 2 out of 8 here so that we can get to 6 out of 6 for dodge rating and mana regen, as well as a mana gain on dodge. This is a very, very strong skill for keeping our mana up while we're fighting stuff. Then we go 7 out of 7 here for increased throwing speed, as well as throwing attack damage. We go 6 out of 6 here for increased throwing damage and throwing damage conversion for our Falcon. We go 6 out of 6 here for the defenses. We go 4 out of 6 here for more defenses. We go 1 out of 1 here, so our Falcon abilities are instant casts, which just allows us to cast more stuff at the same time. We go 6 out of 6 here for crit chance and crit multiplier. We go 1 here so that we can get to 3 out of 6 here for our more damage per slow. And then we go 6 out of 6 here for damage taken while moving, increased move speed, and increased dodge rating. Now, we've got 19 points left to spend and a lot of flexibility in what we do with those points. If you need more defenses, you can come over here and maybe take some dex and glancing blow. If you need more offenses, we can do things like increased caltrops for more defenses. We can move down here and get some more health. This one right here gives us Silver Shroud on our ability that we're spamming. This is going to be Dive Bomb is what we have here, just because it's got a 10-second cooldown anyway, so we're going to be hitting that all the time anyway. You can come over here to do increased damage with a one-handed weapon. But these last 19 points, you've got some flexibility to spend and kind of round out your character in ways that are going to fit how your scaling is and how your gearing is going. Now, like I said, this is a as we are now guide and an idea on what you can do to improve the equipment on your character. There is no need to do a true in-game build guide on this one because it will vary based on what you have access to. But we may go ahead and post an update link later with just like the perfect gear so that people have goals. Now, as far as how I feel about the build playing it, it's amazing. The damage is consistent, solid. It's flawless on arena style maps. I think it will do very well in arena once we get the gear up. The gearing itself, it's a little hard to min max, but it's pretty good to get going. The throwing attack speed, or sorry, the throwing mana cost is crucial because every time we throw an explosive trap, we're launching 3 of them out because of our skills. That means every explosive trap is 3 acid flasks. With -4 and -4, we're at 2 mana cost per acid flask. That's 6 for the explosive trap, I think, and then 6 for the acid flask. If you've only got a -3 and a -3, you're going to be at 3 mana or maybe 4 mana on your acid flask, which starts to get very prohibitive. So this -4 throwing mana cost or -5 if you can get it is very, very crucial. Now you only have to run 1 Ring of the Third Eye, and so you could run something else, not Ring of the Third Eye, in your offhand here. But this is a very important piece of gear to get for the build. Now you can run without the Ring of the Third Eye and just run regular rings with the throwing mana cost on it, but then that makes the ward per shroud, per shadow cast from the smoke bomb much more important. Now we'll talk about our skills here. Acid Flask is pretty straightforward. It is critical that we go down across here. We want the increased crit strike multiplier. We want the increased hit damage. And we want the mana efficiency here. It's critical that we go down to here. All we really care about is the poison penetration per uncapped poison resist, which converts to cold with our vial. And then any extra points we have get dumped over in here because this is a multiplicative damage modifier. Over on Falconery, we want to go up here for our buff for move speed and throwing. Actually, we just get move speed here. I think this is throwing attack speed as well, actually. I'm sorry. It is throwing attack speed because it's general attack speed and move speed. And then we go over here for increased chance for Falconer's Mark, because Falconer's Mark is what we trigger for this over here. We come over here so that we can get our kill threshold. We come up here for our mana regen. We go all the way down here so that it prioritizes the target that we're attacking. And then I personally go down here with extra points to make our Falcon get our increased damage and our increased crit chance and our increased crit multi. This is a huge bonus to the damage from our Falcon strike itself. Now you could not put these points here and instead put them in side by side for an increased cooldown here, and maybe put it up here so that your next hit against the target deals more damage when it consumes the mark, but I think this is a better way to go. On our explosive trap, these points are crucial. You go up and across here to get your traps, throw acid flasks. You want a 3 out of 3 and a 1 out of 1 here, so you have a 100% chance for every explosive trap to sprinkle, and the sprinkler throws extra explosive traps out and throws acid flasks out. And then we come down over here for mana efficiency and mana cost reduction on our explosive trap. And then we come down here to give our Falcon penetration. And then we come over here so our Falcon skills have an increased cooldown recovered when our explosive traps detonate. Now, next thing we want to do is rush down to here because we want cold snap mines and static mines and Trappist, which makes it throw out a cold, a lightning, and a fire trap all at the same time when you toss it without incurring extra mana cost. Now I went 3 out of 4 in here for fire res shred stacks because this also gives us lightning shred and more importantly cold shred on the target, and increases the damage of the explosive trap, which is minimal, but it stacks the shred stacks faster. However, if you have the -5 throwing cost and you have the mana and mana regeneration to do it, you can take these 2 points out of here and stick them over here to throw additional traps. I think the play style is a little clunkier because you have much more mana generation issues, but it does have higher burst and potentially kills bosses a little bit quicker, as long as you can kill the boss before you run out of mana. Now for our smoke bomb, we go 5 out of 5 here for duration, 5 out of 5 here for increased throwing damage stacks while we're in the smoke bomb. And these are the important nodes. We also want to increase the area of the smoke bomb a little bit and then get down to expert tactics and cloaked incursion, which allows us to use it as a traversal skill and also reduces the cooldown of it. Once you have all of this, you have a choice. Now, I went over here for Silver Shroud because it gives us a little bit more durability and also causes us to dodge an attack that would otherwise kill us if we leap into a boss mechanic that, we weren't paying attention to. Now, if you have ward on Shroud on your helmet or on your body armor, then you take 4 points out of here and you stick 4 points in Umbral Assault. If you don't have that, then you get 4 points over here for more Dust Shroud, which just increases our glancing blow and dodge generation rate while we're standing in the smoke cloud. Now, if you don't have an Eliko's Abandon when you're building your skills, you're going to lose 2 points out of here, 2 points out of here, and 2 points out of here. Again, those first 2 points come from here. The next 2 points come from here, and the last 2 points will come out of here. Now, if you've got Eliko's Abandon, obviously you have a little bit more flexibility, but if you don't have it and you have the Shroud, then you're going to lose 2 points here, and you have to pull 2, 1, and then 1 from here to come down here, so that you have 4 out of 4 on the shadow chance per second. Now, Dive Bomb we're using for 2 different reasons. One, it just hits hard. Dive Bomb is a very powerful skill. We rush all the way over here for the second purpose of Dive Bomb, which is to detonate our explosive traps and to give us Talon Blade stacks for it. So we get Talon Blade stacks when Featherfall hits something, we get Talon Blade stacks when Dive Bomb hits something, and now we get Talon Blade stacks whenever our explosive trap is triggered. And so if we've got 6 explosive traps on the ground and we trigger this, we get 1 from hitting something, maybe 1 or 2 from Featherfall hitting something, and then 6 from our traps detonating, which gives us a lot of crit multiplier and increased critical strike chance. Now, once we're rushed over to here, we come back and we go over to here, and this increases our smoke bomb duration. Again, this is getting nerfed next patch, so I'm not going to talk about the current bugged power of it, but you'll still take this even after the patch because it just makes your smoke bomb last a little bit longer. And then we're going to come down here for mana gain on boss or rare hit because it's very important that we increase our mana gain. This will also make our smoke bomb come up faster. After that, we rush down to here for reduced delay on the dive bomb and a little bit of increased damage on the dive bomb. This is great for just a feel and use of the ability as we're playing around. You're going to use dive bomb at the location that you throw your traps. So you throw your traps on the target and you dive bomb on the traps and the target is the most ideal way to do it. Realistically, you're just going to hold down your dive bomb key while you're spamming traps everywhere, and the dive bomb will just do its job as long as you're mousing over the mobs. Now, if you have any questions over anything, hit me up on Twitch, hit me up on YouTube. You can reach me in the comments, but most importantly, I know you've heard it 1,000 times. Like, follow, subscribe. It is absolutely crucial to the content creators that you do these activities for us. If we haven't earned it and you don't think we're worth it, I get it. But if you like the video and you like the content, give us the like, give us the subscribe, give us the follow. It's really what makes the most impact in our livelihood, and it's 100% free for you. Thank you very much for watching the video, and y'all have an absolutely wonderful day.